A tropical, palm-fringed island in the middle of the Indian Ocean, peaceful and prosperous, a successful mix of Hindu, Muslim, European, African and Chinese cultures. That's how Mauritius likes to present itself in the tourist books. And by and large, it's true. But there is also another side to this island. Its wealth has been built on protected access to Western markets for its sugar and textiles. And there are some here who feel they've been left out of what the Mauritians like to call their economic miracle.
The Prime Minister of the Republic of Mauritius, Dr. Navin Ramgoolam, will officially inaugurate the opening of Mauritius Development Company Limited.
A new venture for a boom economy. Mauritius, 1,500 kilometres east of the African mainland, is promoting its new port as a transshipment centre at the heart of the Indian Ocean, serving countries as distant as South Africa and Australia. As the Prime Minister recalled, it's just the latest in a series of measures to strengthen an economy which, when British rule ended 30 years ago, was entirely dependent on sugar.
In the years following our independence, Mauritius was faced with the challenge of transforming a monocrop agrarian economy into a diversified industrial and commercial economy. With the rapid development taking place in the free port, we are now fully embarked on the transformation of Mauritius into an important business hub and into the busiest and most modern ports in the region.
A textile factory in the south of Mauritius. It employs more than 100 workers, most women, and makes garments which will eventually be sold in the smarter shops in Europe and North America.
They are making a polo shirt and t-shirt, and those garments also we are making. This is all for export.
And this is a very new factory?
Very new factory. Yes, this is a very new factory.
80,000 Mauritians now work in textiles, out of a total population of a little over 1 million. It's overtaken sugar as the island's main money earner. Vedna Esu, economist at the Mauritius Employers Federation, says the country has achieved a lot since independence, above all in broadening its economic base.
Diversification is one of our causes of success. When we started off with just relying totally on sugar, it meant that overnight the economy could be on its knees if a cyclone came by. And now we have diversified into industrialization, tourism, and we are developing the fourth pillar, which is financial and business services. So we could say that we've done very well on that front.
At the central bank, there are a few clouds on the horizon. Labour costs are now much higher than in, say, Sri Lanka or Indonesia. There are shortages of skilled workers. The trade deficit is widening. And for an economy based on export-led growth, the crisis in Southeast Asia is, to say the least, disconcerting. But there was perhaps a measure of self-congratulation as the bank's governor, Mitrajit Marai, listed for me all the achievements of the Mauritian economy.
Well, when you talk about the level of unemployment of around 5%, that is already a big achievement compared to any country in the world, as a matter of fact. We have a rate of inflation below 6%. That is an achievement. We have a rate of growth just above 5%. That is an achievement. I mean, this has been so for a number of years. We have people with a good level of education. This is an achievement for a small country like Mauritius. Come back to the cultures and living in harmony. This is an achievement.
Part of the success has been a largely peaceful decolonisation, which encouraged European entrepreneurs and money to stay in Mauritius. It's been helped by a remarkable degree of political stability in one of the world's most culturally varied nations. And since a sharp economic crisis in the early 80s set the island on the road to free market economics, there's also been cross-party consensus on policy. That, says Vedna Esu, has been crucial to business confidence.
It is very, very important because overnight the government can change, but the policies, the general philosophy will always remain the same. So you won't have stuff like nationalization, and so investors feel secure about that.
But Mauritius has a Labour Party government. The main opposition parties have got the words militant or socialist in them, but you're saying that they all agree on what is basically a free market liberal economy.
These demarcations don't count anymore. They all have the same philosophy. They call Mouvement Militant Mauricien, but in fact It's not like a radical type of approach. They all have the same approach.
The leader of the Mouvement Militant Mauricien is Paul Béranger, the most prominent non-Indian in the island's politics. He's been in and out of government, though never Prime Minister. He's now leader of the opposition. But does a man who boasts about learning his politics in the streets of Paris during the student revolt of 1968 really admit to giving a free rein to international capitalism?
I haven't used the word capitalist, of course, but yes, all the three big parties agree on fundamentals, on the role of the private sector, on protecting private property, on getting foreign investors into Mauritius. And yes, we've been an economic success. But we've been lucky also. I'm used to telling the World Bank and the IMF that it's very unfair to use the Mauritius economic miracle as a showcase, because we've been lucky on different counts. We've benefited massively from the sugar protocol. We sell nearly all our sugar at guaranteed prices, 2-3 times the world price. We've been doing that for decades now. Also our size. When our exports multiplied by I don't know how much, for little Mauritius no one noticed. But if it had been Indonesia, if it had been Nigeria or Kenya or Mexico, whose textile exports would have multiplied that way, you would have had a protectionist revolt. So yes, little Mauritius has done all right.
And on the issue of national identity, how well Mauritius has managed to weave together Hindus, Muslims, African Creoles, and a smattering of French and Chinese, Paul Béranger is even more fulsome.
We've done well, I believe. We've just celebrated our 30 years of independence. And yes, we've done well. We are rather proud of what we as a nation, what we have achieved. When you have Rwanda, Burundi next door, Sri Lanka on the other side of the Indian Ocean, and when you remember that in Mauritius in 1965 and 1968, communities, what we call here communities, different communities killed each other, butchered each other. We are proud of what we have achieved since independence. Indeed, it's still fragile, but we are a shining example of coexistence amongst different communities, all the great religions, different cultures, and so on.
No one can pretend that in Mauritius religious and ethnic identity doesn't matter. It does. The parties are not divided simply along racial lines, but the fact is that Hindus of Indian origin make up just over half the population, and when it comes to political power, they call the shots. Manu Binik, himself a Hindu and the Minister for Economic Development, says the goal of the government is emphatically not integration, but a much repeated slogan in Mauritius, unity through diversity.
I think when you put people together like this, each one tries to protect his own traditions and his own cultures. But you'll find that our mode of dress, our mode of food is quite common. We dress the same way when we eat the same food by and large, no matter what your ethnic background, what your cultural background happens to be. We by and large speak the same language as well. We generally go to the same schools. We may have some different norms of behavior in terms of cultural patterns, in terms of religious patterns and so on. But we want it that way because we want to protect our differences. The state subsidizes every single religion. So we do that because we do not believe in a melting pot approach. We call ourselves a rainbow nation, and if you blend all the colors in the rainbow, it will be a very dull shade. So we believe that we have a vibrant society, we have a vibrant democracy, and our strength comes from the plural nature, and we want to keep it that way.
Prayers at Grand Bassin, a lake in the interior of the island, and one of the biggest Hindu pilgrimage spots outside India. At one annual festival, Mahashivratri, up to 300,000 devotees crowd the lakeside temples. That's a quarter of the island's total population. Dan Subra of Hindu House in the capital Port Louis says the island's Hindu faithful are devout and observant.
We have had people coming from India and they're impressed in the manner that we have been carrying the banner of the Hindus, in the sense that they say in India that the young generation seems to be losing touch with their Sanskriti, with their Sanja and things like that. When they come to Mauritius, they're impressed that we in Mauritius, we have been able to sort of keep alive. Prayers, our pujas and our mandirs and our venerations for idols. We think we are upholding in Mauritius, as far as we are concerned, what are written in our sacred books.
At the same time, the Hindu community is divided along doctrinal, regional and caste lines. They make common cause when they have to keep their grasp on political power. But Mauritius is emphatically not India. It's much more prosperous, there are no rickshaws or bullock carts, and no one plays cricket. Sorting rice in a Hindu household in a small sugar-growing village. Among themselves, the older people still speak Bhojpuri, a dialect which indentured labourers from North India brought with them to the sugar estates. But the links with India are fading away. Few people have family there or know which village their forebears came from. The Indian languages are slowly being superseded by Creole. And of course, the Indians share the island with other communities. The Catholic Church is still strong, led as ever by European priests, but gathering its congregation among the African Creoles, who make up perhaps 30% of the population and feel distinctly left out, excluded is the word often used, of prosperity and power. Father Roger Cerveau is an African Creole priest who's urging what's always been a deeply conservative church establishment to start doing something to help its flock.
The church in Mauritius just, reflects the whole situation of the country, because all people try to say all is correct, no problem, we in Mauritius it's okay, and when you try to tell something, the whole institution thinks that it is ébranlé.
Ébranlé, stirred up. Father Cerveau is certainly trying to do some stirring. There are, he acknowledges, many poor Indians in the sugar villages and the small towns, but they are not the most disadvantaged of Mauritian communities.
The one who is excluded the more is the Creole. People of African origin mixed with other, because I think the problem is very deep-rooted since slavery. I think, for example, the Hindus, who are the majority, they take the biggest part of the cake, as we say. You've got the whites. They have always been the ones who have economy, a big part of the economy in their hands. Whereas the Creole has got the problem that he's not organized, so he cannot fight his way in the Mauritian society. He's always excluded, but he's excluded because he's not organized.
African Creoles have little political voice. They own hardly any land. They're not prominent in the private sector. Dev Virasamy, poet, teacher and former politician, says the other communities in Mauritius still have not fully accepted the Creoles as equals.
We like to declare in touristic brochures for the outside world that it is the land of rich cross-fertilization, but I doubt whether it is. In fact, I find that it is the land of prejudices, the land of mistrust and suspicion and the fear of the other one. I believe that the Creoles is the group which has been deprived of almost everything, of the basic elements of humanity. By Creoles, I mean the Afro-Creoles. The mass of the Afro-Creole are those we find in the working class housing estates, in poor villages. This is where they are. And these people were in the past colonized. We have to say the word. They were colonized by the church, colonized by the white tycoons. They are the descendants of the slaves who have won freedom but who have not been given the means to make maximum use of that freedom. They are not given their due. Something will have to be done if we do not want an explosion.
A street-side game of dominoes in Rochebois, a mainly Creole district in the north of the capital, Port Louis. By African or Indian standards, this is not a poor area. But in Mauritius, this suburb has become a byword for deprivation. Looking on at the dominoes game, Wesley Eve, 18 years old and hoping to go to hotel school.
The very first problem in Rochebois is drugs. We have many drugs addicts.
What drugs?
Hard and soft. Cannabis, marijuana, brown sugar also. And the second problem is unemployment. Especially the young one do not have work.
But the government says everybody has a job.
No, it's a false statement. The government do not do things for the people, especially in Rochebois. We had other suburbs of Port Louis, Sainte-Croix, Stella-Cure. This is considered as a poor areas.
Do you feel that the government doesn't take full notice of Creoles?
Of course, yes. Especially I blame the government.
There is no sense of a volcano raging just under the surface of Mauritian society. But, as opposition leader Paul Béranger acknowledges, there is a growing resentment among those on the margins of the Mauritius economic miracle.
There have been categories that have been left behind by development for historical reasons, sociological reasons, and so on. There is here, unfortunately, the risk of explosion in certain underdeveloped regions where the tension is very high. What is called here the Creole community, that is the people of African and Malagasy descent, had been left over for a long time by development. But over the past years, there's been a prise de conscience. They have become very, very much conscious of that, of the importance of education, and of standing up on their own feet. This is very positive, sometimes painful also, because it goes back to slavery, it goes back to very, very painful things. But things are happening, and I'm convinced that things will keep on happening.
A beach party outside Port Louis. The beer's flowing, the women are singing sega, a sensuous African style of music which has become the hallmark of Mauritian culture. The African Creoles have also given Mauritius its common language. Everyone here speaks Creole, a language born out of the shock of slavery when people of widely differing cultures suddenly had to find a means of communicating. Yet Creole has no official status in Mauritius, a fact that Dev Virasamy, who writes most of his poetry in Creole, finds shaming.
There has been a deliberate attempt by all those who have been in power for quite some time to ignore the language and to pretend that it isn't there, but it is. And as a consequence of this, because we ignore the basic linguistic reality of Mauritius, we have serious problems to solve. Over 50% of people working in factories in the export processing zone, for example, use their thumbprint to collect their wages. We want to believe, and we want people to believe that we are multilingual, but I know that most Mauritians are semilingual, with a smattering of a few languages, but unable to communicate using language in a coherent way.
English and French are the official languages of Mauritius, but the language policy is at best confused. Georges Robert is a French-speaking, Oxford-educated Mauritian lawyer. When I called at his offices in Port Louis, he had the island's civil code on his desk. And what language is it in?
It's all in French, and the legislative text is still in French. All amendments are made in French to this date.
And the language of the courts here?
The language of the courts is English. So you find yourselves with judges delivering judgments in English and quoting from the French text in French.
And when they have witnesses, what language do the witnesses speak?
The witnesses speak the local language, which we call Creole, which is a form of French.
Many would dispute that Creole is a form of French, but let that pass for the moment. The lack of official status for Creole means that it can't be used in the National Assembly or in schools. The government's case, put to me by Manu Binik, the Minister for Economic Development, is that promoting Creole would isolate Mauritius from the rest of the world.
Creole is very much of a lingua franca, so I think it's the language which unites most Mauritians. But it's not a language which is written, at least by any meaningful section of the population. I think we discuss in Creole, we talk in Creole, the weather bulletins are in Creole when cyclones are coming, our political speeches tend to be in Creole. But the countries that have tried to adopt Creole as a formal language have by and large had difficulty, especially when they're small countries. You just have to look at the experience of Seychelles next door, which tried to do precisely that. We also believe that Creole has a unifying effect in Mauritius. But we also believe that we are a very small place. We know we are a small place, and we have to learn languages that are going to serve our people well in their working career. If you learn everything about Creole, it won't take you anywhere. It won't earn you one single job anywhere, like the Seychellois have discovered to their discredit.
The status of the Creole language is bound up with the political standing of the African Creole community. The general attitude among Creoles, expressed with mild resentment rather than burning anger, is that Hindus rule over them. Not so, says Dan Subra of Hindu House.
This is a totally incorrect concept. Mauritius is a fully democratic country. Everybody is given the same right. So to that extent, one cannot say that the Creole are excluded from development. But one thing, though, I think it's a personal opinion, it's a matter of culture. We think that they have yet to learn from their brethren, from the Hindus, from the Muslim, that to achieve something there is necessarily a hard work. One has to economize, one has to work hard, one has to go to school. But we are glad that the Afro community has realized that they have not sort of given enough attention to these very important parameters, and they are slowly catching over.
That's a milder way of saying, as many Hindus do, that the African Creoles are more interested in drinking than working and have been too improvident to buy land, save, or invest in education for their children. It's hardly an outlook which encourages communal harmony. In 30 years, Mauritius has only had Hindu prime ministers. I asked government member Manu Binik why that was.
I'll remind you that there is still no black president in the US, in spite of I don't know how many years, how many decades or centuries of independence. So I don't find anything difficult in trying to explain that we've had only a Hindu prime minister in Mauritius in our 30 years of independence. I think the day you have produce a Negro president, perhaps put the question again here and we'll see.
But do you think the day will come soon when there is a non-Hindu prime minister?
It will come probably as soon as there will be a Negro president in the White House.
That might be another century or so.
Well, that doesn't make us any less of a democracy than the US is.
But among the young, encouraged by relative prosperity, there is a growing sentiment that Mauritians must stand together and build a common identity. Manda Boulel, arts administrator with the British Council in Mauritius, says this is starting to show.
There is more and more among the young people the sense of a national identity coming up. It may not be as evident to other people these days, but if you go around the island and talk to young people, you will find that this is clear.
But how would young people today define themselves? If they had to pick one label, would it be Hindu or Creole, or would it be Mauritian?
I think it would be Mauritian. They want to be Mauritian, and I think that after 30 years of independence, they are all looking towards the fact that we have to be one nation.
The main market in Port Louis, the traders are bargaining in Creole. The shoppers, the younger ones at least, do not regard religion or race as their defining identity.
What community are you from?
Me? I'm in religion Islam.
First of all, are you Mauritian or Muslim or...
No, first of all, in Mauritius, I am a Mauritian, right? In my religion, I am Islam.
And what community are you from?
Christian.
Do you feel, first of all, that you are a Mauritian or a Christian or a Creole or...
A Mauritian. Just a Mauritian.
Do you think that the communities are able to live happily here?
Yes, why not? We are all people, all human.
For such an ethnically diverse island nation, and state-run radio broadcast in as many as 12 languages to its million or so listeners, there is much to be proud of. Stability, prosperity, and a fair measure of peaceful coexistence. But this is an island which is politically part of Africa, ethnically more Indian, and economically still offshore Europe. It's not sure where its loyalties lie. Dev Virasamy, himself an example of the mix which makes up Mauritius, a poet with an Indian name who makes his living teaching English and writes largely in Creole, read me a poem he'd written deriding attempts to co-opt Creole as some form of French dialect, insisting that Mauritius is an island with its own language, culture and identity.
Moi, moitié nan en ser handicap, qui t'y paie santé grand matin tantôt, l'ON pied goyave, précote mo la fenêtre. Li ti nourri moi à se la musique, mo ti nourri li à la grain timil. Et tout le day ensemble, nous ti bien côte nous. I had a little bird which sang its song to me and I fed it. And we grew well together, my bird and me. And then you came, you caught it, put it in a beautiful birdhouse painted blue, red and white. But my bird is singing no more. Let it go free. It can only thrive on the coconut tree.
But a little cultural confusion is hardly going to cause a lot of grief. Or is it? Dev Virasamy believes it's indicative of social and political inequalities which could yet flare up and consume an island which seems, at the moment, to have so much going for it.
This place is calm in a certain way. It is calm at the moment. It has been calm for quite some time because of economic growth. People are not starving. They can get a job. But if there is an economic recession, then we are in for real trouble. And those people who have been left out, excluded from the mainstream, they're going to stand up and ask for their rights.